Hey guys, what we're looking at today is section 5.4, slavery in Alabama, and our essential question is, how did slaves contribute to the growth of Alabama? How did slaves contribute to the growth of Alabama? We need to be thinking about that as we are going through our presentation today, as we are reading, and that's a question that we need to be able to answer at the end of our study. All right, so there are terms that you need to know. The first one is cotton gin. Cotton gin was invented by Eli Whitney, this fellow right here. This is cotton, and this is the cotton gin. Cotton gin is a simple machine that can make seeds out of fiber. Again, it was invented by Eli Whitney. The economy, all the things that people do to make and sell goods and services. So one of the things that they did was they picked cotton and they ran it through the cotton gin and they sold it, and that's how they kept the economy boosted. Mill, factories built near rivers with swift flowing water. These guys right here are in a mill. All right, now we've got a picture of slaves, and they're on what is called a slave ship, and I'll talk to you more about that as we go around. Black slaves had been a part of the Spanish and the French settlements. The British started bringing Africans to America in as early as 1619 to work as slaves on Virginia plantations. The first slaves to come to Mobile arrived in 1721. So Mobile is down here it's part of Mobile, but it's way down here, way down south. But it is part of Alabama. Slaves were forced to work and could not quit their jobs or leave the area. The last slave ship. This is a picture of the last slave ship. There are no known pictures of the slave ship, but this, based on documents, this is what the last known slave ship looked like. And it was called the Clotilde. That's Clotilde. And it arrived in Mobile in 1860. All right, so they started out over here in Africa, and they sailed all the way over to Mobile. The Clotilde arrived in Mobile in 1860 with a load of slaves to sneak in and sell. Descendants of this group later started a settlement near Mobile called Africatown, USA. But in 1860, about a third of the Alabama families owned slaves. Most owned less than 5 slaves. The Black Belt and Tennessee River Valley were good for growing cotton, and so they had the most slaves. Field slaves. These guys are field slaves right here. But before we go to that, I wanted to show you, this is a picture of wreckage of the Clotilde. All right? So it wrecked sometime in 1860, right here before it got to Mobile. Somewhere in the Mobile Bay, right along here, you can see. It was found right down here. So sometime in 1860, and they found the ship, the remnants of it. And this shows what, kind of like a sketch, a blueprint of it. And it had two different tiers to it, 2 different levels. So field slaves worked outdoors on the farm from sunrise to sunset. House slaves, some were on the inside that were house slaves. They worked as servants for the family in the house. Slaves lived in cabins, often with dirt floors. Over here, this is a picture of a slave cabin that was taken in Hale County, Alabama. The masters, the owners, who were also the planters, because they were the ones that owned the plantation, gave food and clothing to the slaves. The wives could often serve as nurses to sick slaves. The beliefs and the custom of the slaves had to ask permission to marry. They sang songs of heaven because they felt like their life here was it was just so sad, and that their home in heaven, their eternal home in heaven, they felt like it was much better there, much better than their earthly life. So they would sing slave songs. The slaves would sing songs. African traditions of singing and preaching blended with the tradition of Southern churches. Slaves, they could attend church, but they had to sit in the back. They couldn't sit with their masters. All right, and right here we see this map. I'm trying to make it bigger so you can see. All right, this is a map from 1860, and you can see that the part where it's light green, there were less than 15%. And right here we are in Randolph County. Here we are in Randolph County over here. All right, so there were less than 25% here. The medium green, there was 25 to 50% slaves, a population of slaves, and then the dark green, there were 50% or greater. Now let me make this smaller so I can finish my presentation. Shroop, shroop. Slave codes. Slave codes were laws. Like we have laws now, the slaves had laws too. They were meant to control the lives of the slaves. One law made it illegal to teach slaves to read or write. They couldn't carry weapons, they couldn't own land, they couldn't own animals, and they couldn't speak against their owners or any white man in court. Slaves who broke a law could be whipped or much worse. They could be sold, which might break up their families. Free blacks. Well, there were some free blacks in Alabama, and some of them even owned slaves. Slaves might buy their freedom or have it given to them by their masters. Most free blacks moved to towns where they could work as carpenters, cooks, barbers, or factory workers. Free blacks had to carry passes to prove that they were free, but they couldn't vote, and most of them couldn't get an education. All right, and then here again is the cotton gin. Here again we have the cotton gin. Eli Whitney invented it. And here we have the workers working in the mill on the cotton gin. The dark soil of the Black Belt was good for growing cotton. The state's long growing season was good for crops too. So Eli Whitney's invention of the cotton gin, which the cotton gin's first name was cotton engine, and they shortened it. The balls were filled with seeds that they had to be removed. And pulling out these seeds by hand was just too slow of a process. So Eli Whitney wanted to speed up the process to pull the seeds from the cotton. So the invention, first powered by man, was later powered by water or horsepower. Cotton Kingdom. The invention of the cotton gin encouraged farmers to grow cotton. Alabama moved from growing 4% of America's cotton to 23%. So what they did was, and they knew that cotton, that was something that was needed in the South and something that they could use to boost the economy. So growing more cotton required more slave workers and made people more wealthy. Alabama's cotton was shipped to mills in Europe through the ports of Mobile and New Orleans. This trade made Alabama a cotton kingdom. So again, the slaves are in Africa, and the slave ships would leave from Alabama and go to Africa. And then the very last ship, again, was the Clotilde, and there's the wreckage. These guys are descendants, I'm not sure if I shared that with you or not, of slaves that were actually on the Clotilde. But the problem is the wreckage burned and it crashed, and so they found the wreckage in the Mobile Bay. That's all for our presentation today. I'll see you back soon for Chapter 6. I hope you guys are doing good.